There's nothing worse than standing up in front of a whole bunch of people after someone just says you're a good speaker to speak. Here we are. Hey, if you got a Bible, grab it. Meet me in Luke chapter 10 today. Luke chapter 10. It is so good to be with you and to be here. And Steve alluded to it, but it was actually about Labor Day weekend of my freshman year of college, about 50 yards south of here in seats just like these, that God got a hold of my heart and did something that I'm still recovering from in a really good way. My wife attended here also during school. We didn't meet till we were in graduate school at Dallas Seminary, but our life and our marriage and our ministry owe such a huge debt of gratitude to this church and some of the specific people that I see in this room. Some of my spiritual heroes are a part of Countryside Baptist Church here in Stillwater, and I'm so, so grateful. And I think Greg Justice goes here too, so... Yeah, so true story, and some of you know Greg. When I was a freshman, I was just starting to grow with Christ, and somebody gave me really great advice. They said, find somebody that's a few steps ahead of you that you want to be like and ask him to mentor you. And so I picked Greg. I picked Greg Justice to be my mentor, which tells you everything you need to know about me. And also, if I say anything that's even remotely offensive to you today, you'll know exactly where that comes from. And just pray for Susan after the service. So... really, really good to be with you all. Our church, I told you already, my marriage, our family, our church has benefited from the ministry of Countryside. We've got several people on our staff that came through here. Several of our residencies, in fact, Allie Dyer, we just launched her today from the residency, and just really grateful for the ministry of this church. And if you're pursuing ministry after this and are interested in a ministry, we have a cool partnership with Dallas Seminary and Southwestern Seminary to sort of help you get that paid for and get some real ministry experience as well. So I'd love to talk to you about that if you're interested in it. But I'm honored to be here with you in Luke chapter 10 today. So our world is celebrating Labor Day tomorrow by not laboring. So I just finished teaching through Luke chapter 10 at our church, and there's this story at the very end of Luke chapter 10 that's all about work and not working at all. And so I thought it would be appropriate for us to talk about that today. So Luke chapter 10 is where we're going to be. I'm going to start in verse 38. If you got a Bible, I'll just read it for us. Luke chapter 10, beginning in verse 38, says this: As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset among many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary's chosen what's better, and it will not be taken away from her." Cornelius Ryan's book, The Last Battle, tells the story of Russian soldiers on their way back home after World War II. They'd seen a lot at war. They'd experienced a lot, and they were ready to go home. But there were a couple of things that they wanted to make sure that they did not go home without. That was running water and light on command. They'd experienced both of those for the first time while they were fighting in Europe, and they were determined that they were going to take it back with them to the place that they came from. So as they got ready to go back home, they went into all of the German homes that they'd been occupying, and they took all of the light bulbs out of the fixtures and stuffed them in their bags. And they took all of the faucets off of the sink and all of the hose bibs from outside, and they took them off of the wall and put them in their bags, and they lugged them all the way back to Russia. Like the back-breaking weight of light bulbs and iron faucets all the way back to Russia. But they knew it'd be worth it because they just had this picture in their mind of when they got back, they were going to get the opportunity to introduce all of their friends and all of their loved ones to the source of eternal light and living water that they all needed, but they had no idea they'd been missing all this time. And you can just imagine as they carried the back-breaking weight of all of these fixtures all the way back to Russia, how they'd practiced what it would be like, when they presented this gospel of eternal light and living water to these people that they knew and they loved who desperately needed to receive this gift and hadn't yet. How they responded when they realized that all of the weight they'd been carrying was totally worthless without something really important that they left behind. You have to imagine they'd practiced how they'd reveal this gospel of eternal light and living water to all of the people that they loved every chance they get. And you have to imagine how flat that presentation just had to feel. They stood in front of those people and pulled the fixtures out of their bag and showed them nothing. You have to wonder with the time and distance how frustrated, how discouraged they had to be when this thing that they couldn't wait to show to the people that they loved didn't work, didn't seem to. Didn't even work the way it used to work for them when they first discovered it. Are you tracking? See, if you're just reading through Luke chapter 10, like I tend to read through my Bible sometimes, just skimming through looking for familiar stuff, this sure feels like a story, this thing about Mary and Martha that comes out of nowhere. I mean, it's Luke chapter 10. So Luke chapter 10 starts with Jesus sending out 72 ordinary people to ordinary places that he's getting ready to go in order that they would have influence in the places that they go, to the people that he's sending them towards. And then they come back and it's gone really well. They're fired up and they can't wait to tell him about it. And a guy comes up to him that's a religious expert and says, hey, how good is good enough to get to heaven when you die? Which is not a bad question. Jesus says, well, you're the expert. Why don't you tell me, and then we'll both know. And the guy says, well, I think maybe love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, good, do it. And the guy asks him a question about a technicality, which leads Jesus to tell a really familiar story. Remember it? We call it the story of the Good Samaritan. And all of that goes along. You see this story about how loving anyone near you who needs you is the clearest expression of love for God with all of your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all of your strength. And now for something completely different, here's a story about two sisters who can't get along. Isn't that the way that this feels when you get to this story in Luke chapter 10? That's not at all what this is. Luke is way too good a writer for that. This is a story about water faucets and light bulbs and great commandments and good Samaritans. And it's a story about the reason that it's so easy for people like us to get really frustrated when it comes to following Jesus. And why it's so easy for people like us to get really frustrated with people who claim to be following Jesus. Look back at the story. Let's just walk through it together. Luke chapter 10, beginning in verse 38. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. So Martha's going to get a bad rap before this whole thing is over, so let's pause before we're too hard on her, because the truth is there's a really strong chance that Martha represents you in this story. And by the way, whether or not you are an extrovert or an introvert, one of the dangers of one of these stories, you just rip it out of the context, it becomes a story about personality types. You have Martha, she's the type A, she's the extrovert, she's the always busy one. And then you have another person that's the quiet, calm, contemplative, introvert, really the people that Jesus loves the best, yeah? I mean, come on, fellow introverts, where are you guys at? You got mortified sitting in your seat because you just got called on? All of the fake introverts raise their hand. I'll be that. You're really an extrovert, but you wanted to be seen, so I get it. This is not a story about personality types. It's a story that shows us two radically different models for following Jesus. For loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, and all of our strength, and loving our neighbors as ourselves. And again, it's a story about light bulbs and faucets. Think about the story again. So Martha, at this moment that we meet her, has 84 people near her who need her. That's Jesus' definition of a neighbor, right? So what's Martha doing to the best of her ability in this very moment? She is loving her neighbor as herself. She's being a good Samaritan, what Jesus just said that people ought to be. She's being a good Samaritan while her sister, Mary, is over there sitting on her floor. Mary, verse 39 says, had sat herself. It's a really specific kind of verb that specifies intention and strategy. She plopped herself down. She didn't just get carried along with the crowd and happen to accidentally find herself right there up next to Jesus, so she just decided to sit down while she was there. She planted herself there at his feet and was listening to what he said. Verse 40, but Martha was distracted. Distracted is an interesting word. You know where we get our English word distracted from? Have you ever broken a bone and had to be put in traction? Traction is something that holds things together that are broken so that they can heal. So if that's true, what is distraction? That's literally what this word means in English. It's also literally what this word means in Greek. To be pulled apart, to be pulled away and damaged. In fact, there's an ancient form of torture from the Middle Ages. They would tie a man's arms and legs to 4 different horses and then spook the horses and send them all off in 4 different directions. You know what that form of torture was called? Distraction. Well, we don't really think about distraction as torture these days. When we think about distraction, we think about, syllabus week on campus. We think about life with toddlers, life with multiple kids and youth sports all at the same time. We think of our business calendar and our hobby calendar and our family calendar, trying to get them all synced, and yet they're not synced. They're all pulled apart. Sometimes distracted describes people who are lugging around all of the stuff that we think Jesus expects us to do in order to keep him happy, make him happy, or to do the stuff that he told us to do, that he needs done. All of the spiritual rhythms or disciplines, Bible reading, prayer, small groups, Sunday school, Bible studies, obeying, volunteering, behaving, trying, attending, mentoring, serving. Every time preacher gets a new idea, we have announcement time in church. It's like, I don't know where you're at, sir. But at our house, we're barely holding our heads above water, We're sort of pulled apart over here these days. I can't take anything else for Jesus to be asking me to do these days. But where does that leave us? Well, where does it leave Martha? Leaves feeling like we're all alone, even in a crowd full of people. Wondering, verse 40, if the Lord cares. Angry at him. Resentful of others who have it better but clearly are not working harder. Verse 41, anxious and spun up about many things. You notice Martha accuses Jesus of being the one who's distracted and detached because he can't see how hard she's loving her neighbor, while her sister's sitting in the other room being far less spiritual while pretending to be the most spiritual one. You see what you got here in this story? Like in the Good Samaritan story, you've got 2 religious-looking individuals rushing by a wounded, broken man, convinced that they're loving the Lord their God with all their heart, all their soul, all their mind, and all their strength. And here, you see incredibly sincere Martha rushing right by the Lord her God in a desperate attempt to love her neighbors. Now, where did it go wrong for Martha? Where does it go wrong for us? Well, I think you see 2 things in the story. First one there in verse 40. It says, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So, question, what's the point of preparation? It's not a trick question. To prepare, right? Prepare for what? Well, in this story, in this context, to prepare for the presence of a guest. Okay, do you notice what Martha's doing here? She's preparing the heck out of things. What's she missing? The guest has already arrived. So just imagine for a second, you came over to our house. Came over to our house for dinner, and you show up, one of the kids lets you in the house. You know, you meet them there in the entryway of the house, and you say, where's your dad? They say, yeah, he's cleaning the toilets. You'd say, okay, cool. Would you tell him that we're here? And so right there where they stand in the entryway, they would turn around and they would scream at the top of their lungs, Dad, they're here! Right? I mean, you could have done that, but you asked them to do it, so they did it, and that's how it would work in our house. So imagine, though, that I yelled back at them from the toilets where I was cleaning, I'll be right there, I'm cleaning the toilets so they're clean when they get here. But then after that, I got to go to the store and get ice because they're going to want cold drinks. You know, I want the drinks to be cold. Then I'm going to have to get steaks so I can throw steaks on the grill. But it's okay. It'll all be worth it because I've been looking forward to clean toilets and cold drinks and a good steak all week. If you are so involved in the process of preparing that you don't notice the presence of the one you've been preparing for, there's a fairly good indication that you've missed the whole point. You'd come in and find me there scrubbing the toilets, and you'd say, hey, Chris, hey, we promised not to go to the bathroom. It doesn't have to be clean. Like, chill out, man. We don't have to have cold drinks. Like, do you have tap water? That's fine. And I don't need a steak. Could we do sandwiches? Like, we don't even have to have that. Come on, we're not here for the clean toilets and the cold drinks and the good food. We're here to be with you. Which is exactly what Jesus says in verse 41. This is Martha. Come on, Martha. You're worried and upset about many things. Come on. Few things are needed. Actually, indeed, just one. So what's the one? There are some commentators that say the problem here, Jesus is saying, Martha, hey, you got appetizers, you got salad, you got a soup course, you got a fish course, then you got lamb with the mint sauce and family sides and cheese course, dessert course, all the wine pairings. We don't need all of that. Like really, just like a casserole, you know? I don't think that's what he's saying here at all. I think Jesus is saying the point of the preparation, it's not the preparation. The point of the preparation is the presence of the guest. See, Jesus is just not really that impressed with all of the hard work that you're doing for him without him. What he really wants, his will, it's for you to know him. The presence of Jesus is the one thing that we need more than anything. Preparation pulled her away. But there's something else. Look at verse 42. He says, Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Some of your Bibles translate this, Mary has chosen the better portion. That draws it out a little better. So remember, Martha is making a huge meal. Okay, so think Thanksgiving here. And I don't know what it's like in your family around Thanksgiving time. I've got huge extended family on both sides, mom and dad's side. So when it comes to Thanksgiving for us, it's not fine china, everybody around the same table and family-style dishes just around, we calmly pass each other. That is not the Freeland household at Thanksgiving. So we're talking buffet line and disposable giant plates with the little sections, like the disposable version of the industrial strength thing you used to have in the cafeteria when you were a kid growing up. Remember that? It's got different portion size for different items of food at Thanksgiving. So I'm not your pastor, but I do love this church and I love you. So I'll let you in on a little Thanksgiving secret. When it comes to those portion sizes and those trays, did you know the biggest portion size does not have to be reserved for turkey? I mean, honestly, nobody likes the turkey, The turkey's the bad part. Don't put that in the big part, yeah? So that's a Thanksgiving amateur move, and now you know, I'm trying to help you, okay? So one of the proudest moments I ever had as a dad was walking through the Freeland family Thanksgiving line, and we're walking through the line going through, and I'm walking right behind my oldest son, Kason. And Kason's just going through the line, and I start to notice that he's just putting little bitty parts of the meal in the little bitty portion sections of his plate. And so about halfway through, I lean down, I'm like, hey dude, not hungry? And he, as serious as he could be, looks up from his plate, and he's holding it, looks at me and says, pie's not till the end. I'm like, my job here is done as a father, you know? You have chosen the better portion, son, and it will not be taken away from you. That's the same thing that's happening here. Martha is so busy filling up her plate with a whole bunch of generally good things, to the point that she doesn't have any room for the thing that Jesus is doing in her presence right there in front of her. It's a problem for Martha. It's a problem for me. I wonder if that's a problem for you. Look, my pastor's heart beats for influence. Like, I know yours does too. The elders at this church, theirs do too. Like, I'm part of that legacy. You are too. We're desperate for influence. Desperate to be a people who are so filled up with Jesus that we overflow from our life into the lives of the people around us. This gospel, this good news that we live out of living water and eternal life and light, that it spills over out of us into all of the dark places in our world everywhere we go as a reflection of our love for Jesus. All of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, all of our strength. We cannot get those twisted. We can't just have one without the other. It's so easy to choose one and not the other. Our goal is to live in increasing awareness of the presence of God in every moment of our life. Not just as a church to fill up our spiritual to-do lists, or to have moral alternatives to all of the other things that we could do with our time. To have enough religious activities on our calendar that we stay distracted from Jesus and everything that he's doing in our life, in our midst, every single day. And sometimes what Jesus is doing is bandaging the wounds of a weary, broken, beat-up traveler on the side of the road that nobody else chooses to look at and love. And sometimes he's slowing down to speak in the chaos of a room and of everyday life. Sometimes he's present in your meeting at work, solving a problem, will help you, help others to flourish. Sometimes he's doing something in your fraternity or sorority house in your residence hall. He's doing something in every single room you walk into. And paying attention to his presence in the present moment is the most important thing you can ever do if you want to live a life of abundance and influence. So what would that look like in practice? Can I give you 3 things real quick, just to respond to this story's invitation? I want to invite you to just take a run at this all throughout this week, attending to the presence of God in every room you're in. The first thing is this: acknowledge his presence. Acknowledge the presence of God in the places that you are. Resist the urge to just get busy with busy work, doing good, important things that distract you from the fact that the maker of the stars is present and active in every room you walk in. John Piper once said, God is always doing 10,000 things in your life, and you might be aware of 3 of them. Sometimes I wonder if 3 is not a little bit of an aggressive number for me, you know? But expand that to every room you're in and get curious. Ask him, Lord, what are you doing in front of me? What are you doing around me right this second? Would you show me? Would you let me in on it? Second thing that this story invites us into, acknowledge the presence of God. Second thing is to audit my own attention. Audit my own attention. Take an honest look at where your heart is pulled apart and stretched. What are the things that are pulling you apart? Where are the places that you're settling for detached light bulbs and faucets that are disconnected from the power and the source of life? Things that are good. But without him, they're no good to you. and no good to anybody else around you. Don't misunderstand the activities, the sports, the hobbies, the clubs, the tasks, even religious church-going activities that fill up your calendar. They're not the problem. They're also not the point. They will always just be the equivalent of disconnected light bulbs and water faucets without the presence of God in the place that you're going. So wherever you are, whenever you're there, the invitation is to give intention to your attention. And choose the better portion. And the last piece is something I think God's up to in this room right now. For some of your whole life has been leading to this moment. It's all been preparation for this. So acknowledge the presence of God, audit my own attention, and the third thing is answer Jesus' invitation. Answer Jesus' invitation. Look, for some of you, you spent your whole life busy with religious stuff. You're always there. You go to all of the things. You sign up for all of the events. You lead all of the Bible studies. You've never met Jesus. And you can know him. You can walk with him. He came to the earth to encounter you, to seek you, to save you, to give his life for you so that he can give his life to you and live his life through you wherever you go. And he offers it not as a gift that's received by a task, that's a wage, but as a gift that's received as a gift by faith. And you can receive it right where you sit today. It's as simple as telling him in the privacy of your own heart, Lord, I've tried a whole lot of stuff. I've been busy with a lot of good stuff, even church religious stuff. But I don't know you and I need to. And I believe that Jesus died on a cross for me and rose from the dead to give me forgiveness and hope and his presence and his power as a permanent promise for all my eternity. And I'm receiving that gift right now. Once you receive that gift, you can never lose it. You can sure distract yourself from it. That's the invitation for some of us today. Look, I can't think of a better way to start your college career, to start a brand new semester, start a new semester at work, or to turn a new chapter. Say, Lord, I'm carrying around all of these disconnected light bulbs and faucets, but I want to be filled to overflowing. I want to shine like the sun in the world, but I will never do that if I'm disconnected from you and distracted from your presence in all of the places that you're sending me from here. Would you bow your head with me? Lord, I pray for the person who's shown up to this place today as religious, as anybody else in the room, but realizing that they've never received the gift of everlasting life, of your presence, that they'd receive it in this moment. Or for some of us who find ourselves pulled apart, distracted by all of the good things in our life that we've done without you, that we would take all of the disconnected light bulbs and water faucets and we would run them back to the source. And that beginning today, we would walk with an awareness of your presence. We'd refuse to allow ourselves to be pulled away from anything that you're doing in any moment. And that we would receive your invitation to live your life on this earth, wherever we go. In Jesus' name, amen.